Software engineers, how did you get your first job? Story 1. My journey began with data analysis because my ultimate goal was to get into AI. I spent a lot of time working on different models, but the process was incredibly taxing on my computer, and despite all the effort I put in, I didn't manage to secure a single job interview. It was frustrating. At some point, I decided to try something new, so I switched gears and started working with Django. It didn't take me too long to grasp the basics, and within a month, I had built my first good project and started applying for Django-related jobs. Shortly after, I finally got my first interview. Although I didn't land the job, it was encouraging to finally be considered a potential candidate. Over time, I received multiple interviews for Django positions, and eventually, I secured an internship. The experience was amazing. My team was incredibly supportive and helpful. I learned so much on the job, and I gave it my all every day. By the end of my internship, I was hired full-time, and I couldn't have been more grateful for the opportunity. Story 2. There was a career event at my school where companies were on the lookout for student interns. Surprisingly, the turnout of students wasn't as large as expected, so I took the chance to engage with one of the company representatives, a woman who asked for my CV. Unfortunately, I didn't have one with me, and she pointed out that I should always carry my CV to events like this. Determined not to miss out, I quickly printed my CV, which mostly consisted of personal projects, and handed it to her. I made it a point to give my CV to anyone willing to take it and collected contact information from those who were open to sharing. A week later, I received an email informing me that I had been selected for an internship, which would begin after my graduation. 6 months later, I completed my degree and started my internship. The first 2 months were incredibly challenging because I didn't fully understand the projects and I was still being onboarded. However, after that initial period, I found my footing and began contributing to small parts of the front end. I made a few mistakes along the way, but my team was patient and supportive. By the time my 6-month internship was over, I felt confident in my abilities. I had taken a few extra courses and gained valuable experience. To my delight, I was offered a junior developer position, and I was over the moon. Story 3. After graduating with a degree in computer engineering and having one not-so-great internship under my belt, I decided to focus on learning full-stack development. At first, I tried to learn everything on my own through online resources, but I didn't make much progress. Eventually, I enrolled in a full-stack bootcamp, which my parents graciously paid for. To my surprise, the little bit I had learned by myself gave me a slight edge over some of the other bootcamp participants, many of whom weren't taking the course as seriously as I was. After completing the bootcamp, I had built a few solid projects and received guidance on how to craft a resume and apply for jobs. Not long after, I began applying for full-stack roles. After about a month of sending out applications, I landed a freelance gig helping someone create a website. I didn't charge much, but the client was happy with my work and referred me to others. Although I haven't yet secured a full-time salaried position and have since stopped applying, I now manage the websites of a few clients and have established a steady stream of freelance work. It may not be exactly what I envisioned when I started, but I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had and the progress I've made. Story 4. For me, it didn't take too long to land a job. I was fortunate to have had a lot of on-campus work, volunteering positions, and several internships during my time in school. In fact, before I even graduated, I secured my last internship, which came with a return offer from the company. It gave me peace of mind to know I had a job waiting for me after graduation. However, after some time, I decided to switch gears. I moved to a new company and transitioned from being a full-stack developer to focusing more on front-end development. Story 5. I had applied to so many companies through LinkedIn, Indeed, and other job platforms that I was getting tired of the process. But despite feeling worn out, I kept pushing. One day I was talking to a friend and he mentioned that instead of just applying through those websites, he sends direct emails to recruiters and gets far more responses that way. That advice was a game changer for me. I started looking up recruiters' emails on LinkedIn. If I couldn't find their emails there, I'd check the company's website or come up with possible email variations. I made sure to only reach out to recruiters from companies that had posted jobs recently. In each email, I mentioned the job I was interested in and attached my resume. After about a week or two of consistently sending out direct emails, I finally got a response. I had a short interview followed by a coding test, and then another longer interview. Everything happened so fast, and a week after the longer interview, I received an offer letter. I was over the moon. It felt unreal. Story 6. I was applying for jobs using LinkedIn's Easy Apply feature, and friends would occasionally send me job links. My first real interview was a total disaster. I had recently switched computers, and didn't have an IDE installed, but I assumed everything would go smoothly with an online IDE. During the interview, I was asked to write a simple program, something basic like reversing a string. However, the online IDE just wouldn't work. I was sharing my screen on the Zoom call, and no matter what I did, the code that should have worked simply wouldn't run. I kept debugging while the interviewer silently watched. After what felt like an eternity, I panicked, turned off my internet connection, and emailed the company explaining the situation, asking for a reschedule, which I never got. After that failed attempt, I spent another 3 to 4 months working on various projects and applying for jobs. Then I got another opportunity. This time I made sure I was fully prepared. The first interview was remote and went smoothly with some basic questions. Then came a technical interview with more data structures and algorithms questions. After that, I had 2 one-on-one interviews, one with HR and another with a software engineer. In the end, I got the job, and I'm so glad. I learned from my first interview disaster. Story 7. I had zero experience with HTML, CSS, or JavaScript when I first started, and honestly, I can't even recall what pushed me into learning them. I just remember diving headfirst into HTML, teaching myself through online resources. After that, I moved on to CSS, picking up the basics. While browsing the internet one day, I came across an article that suggested JavaScript was an important language to learn. So I headed over to YouTube and binge-watched various playlists on JavaScript. Once I completed my first JavaScript playlist, I felt a surge of confidence. I quickly put together a simple resume and started applying for any position I could find that mentioned JavaScript: internships, junior roles, even senior positions, despite my lack of experience. Later, I added Python to my skill set and kept applying and learning as I went. After months of persistent effort, I finally landed a trainee position, and I was absolutely thrilled. During my time as a trainee, I absorbed so much valuable knowledge. From there, I secured another internship, and after continuously polishing my resume and improving my skills, I eventually landed a full-time position. Story 8. At one point, I was still living with my parents and feeling completely drained by the job I had at the time. I started watching motivational YouTube videos and learned about the concept of high-income skills. That led me to do my own research, and I eventually decided to pursue designing as my new career path. I quit my job, which wasn't offering much in terms of growth, and dedicated myself to learning one high-income skills, which is designing logos and flyers. But despite my initial excitement, I wasn't satisfied with the quality of my work. A friend introduced me to UI design, and that piqued my interest even more. I dived into it and began creating UI designs. One day, I came up with an app idea that I believed could be profitable, so I decided to keep the design to myself and try to build the app. Initially, I tried using no-code tools, but I didn't quite get the results I wanted. I found a YouTube playlist that taught how to build apps with Flutter, and after completing it, I took a more comprehensive course on Udemy. That helped a lot, and after countless hours of tutorials, Googling, and reading documentation, I was able to build the app using Flutter and Firebase. However, the app didn't catch on as I had hoped. Fast forward about 7 months after quitting my previous job, I started applying for new roles. I even offered to build apps for free, hoping to get my foot in the door. I worked for several startups and individuals for free, but unfortunately, none of those projects took off. Eventually, I attended a developer event and met someone who had a lot of experience with Flutter. We got to talking, and he suggested I apply to the company he worked for, as they were in need of developers. He provided me with the head of HR's email, and I sent him my application. After months of being unemployed, I finally got an interview and, soon after, a new job. It was a huge relief, and I was excited to continue growing in my new career path. Story 9. I did not study computer science, but I went to a boot camp, and after the boot camp, I started looking for jobs. My job search strategy was pretty straightforward, which was to apply to as many jobs as possible. I sent out application after application, and I talked to anyone who would listen, letting them know that I needed a job. I also made sure to attend industry conferences to network and meet people. It took about 3 months, and what I'm sure was over 200 applications before I finally got my first real shot. I made sure to take full advantage of the opportunity when it came. I didn't particularly enjoy that first job, but I was incredibly happy just to be doing something and gaining experience. It was a start, and that was what mattered most to me at the time. Story 10. I'm a computer science graduate, and during my time in school, I used to make games just for fun. I felt confident in my abilities, so after graduating, I started applying for jobs. Unfortunately, my first interview didn't go well at all. It was a tough blow, but I took it as a learning opportunity. I went back to the basics and studied data structures and algorithms, practicing regularly in preparation for my next interviews. After going through multiple rounds of interviews with various companies, I finally received an offer. It was such a surreal moment. I had gotten so used to receiving rejection emails that I wasn't even sure the offer letter was real at first. It worked out in the end. Story 11. After interviewing for several jobs, I eventually landed a job offer. At first, I was thrilled to have found something, but that excitement quickly faded once I started working. The job wasn't what I had hoped for. I was given tasks without much context or understanding of the bigger picture. I wasn't involved in any of the decision-making processes, and my opinions weren't considered. It felt like I was just there to execute instructions without any room for creativity or growth. The work environment wasn't great either. Most people kept to themselves, and I felt isolated. It didn't help that the pay wasn't particularly impressive. After about 3 months of hoping things would improve, I decided to start applying for jobs again. Eventually, after a few months of searching, I found something new. While I didn't enjoy the job or the work environment, it did teach me some valuable lessons. It gave me a clearer understanding of what my day-to-day work would look like, and I did learn a few new things along the way. For that, I'm grateful, though I do wish the overall experience had been better. Story 12. I had a close friend who was a software engineer, earning good money, while I was working as a teacher with a much lower income. I had always asked him to teach me about coding, but I never really focused. One month, my then-employer informed me that I would be taking on more classes without any pay raise. That was the final straw. I was already tired of the job. I made up my mind to quit and dedicate myself fully to software development since I had a friend willing to guide me. I also had enough savings for food, and my rent was covered, so I felt it was the perfect time to make the switch. For the next 3 months, I was practically always at my friend's place. He bought me an online course and gave me project ideas to work on. I made sure to follow through on everything he asked of me so he would see that I was making progress. I'm sure there were times when he got tired of me, but I thank God he had the patience and energy to help me. After completing the course and working on projects, he helped me fix up my resume and gave me pointers for interviews. It didn't take long for me to secure an internship. Later, I believe he even recommended me to a company, which reached out to me, interviewed me, and gave me a job offer. Looking back now, it feels like the journey was easy, but at the time, it was so difficult. I'm so happy I made the decision to switch careers when I did. Story 13. In college, I was actively involved in several tech communities, volunteering and participating in events as much as I could. This gave me access to an incredibly motivated network of people. Together, we worked on amazing projects, creating games, building websites, and much more. I waited until after graduation to start applying for jobs because I had already stretched myself thin juggling community activities, projects, social life, and academics. But during my time in those communities, I had gained invaluable experience and learned a lot about crafting a resume. I modeled mine based on some of the best examples I'd seen. One day, a fellow community member reached out to tell me that the company he worked for was hiring. He gave me the hiring manager's email, and I promptly sent him my resume. I got interviewed, and the job offer followed soon after. Honestly, I can't emphasize enough how much being part of these communities has helped me. I'm still involved in several communities today, and I continue to learn and grow through them. Story 14. I started as a native Android developer back when Java was the primary language for Android. I applied to countless jobs but didn't get any interviews, so I turned to freelancing. Unfortunately, none of the freelance projects I worked on paid up front. Most companies just promised payment later, which never came. Feeling frustrated, I decided to pivot to machine learning, but I didn't stick with that for long. Then, I moved on to web development, learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but I didn't make much progress there either. Eventually, I shifted to back-end development with PHP, and that's when things started to click. After some time, I landed my first internship as a back-end developer. After completing that internship, I got another one, also in back-end development. With 2 internships under my belt, I started applying for junior and mid-level positions. After a while, I finally got a job offer. It was a long journey. Story 15. My first job out of school was at Amazon. I was completely shocked that I had landed it, and I was terrified when I started. The first few months were overwhelming. I had so much to learn, and I received a lot of constructive criticism from my peers and superiors. But after a while, I got the hang of things. I started producing good code and contributing meaningfully to the team. The experience was absolutely magnificent, even though it eventually came to an end. Please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.